welcome back to She Birds Podcast. I am your host, Brooke Michelle, and today's guest is Mandy. Hi, Mandy.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you, and it's
Thank you
nice to
so
be here.
Thank you so much for being a guest.
Most
So,
welcome.
so can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself as an author?
As an author,
Yeah.
I started late in life, hence the grey hair. Um, but I've always been creative, but I found a writing group when I came to Canada,
Oh,
and it just completely hooked me really quickly, and it propelled me into this obsessive craft of like creating characters and locations and scenes and plots and it's given me such a great creative outlet,
mhm.
and I love stories that I can sort of put a twist on them and give you like a really moment. Yeah, and I've got 10 books published.
Oh,
I've
wow.
got two submitted out at the moment. I'm writing a crime trilogy, and just decided today I'm going to write a romance for an anthology. So I was working on that before this.
Nice. So, are you? I think it's indie published. I think, yeah. Like,
No, I'm sort of what they term as a hybrid published.
oh, and what's that?
So, well, because I'm a control freak, I I can't let someone have something and say, okay, go with it. Um, so I work with a publisher who lets me say, right, this is where I want it laid out, and these are the chapter headings I want, and this is the cover I want, and blah
Oh,
blah blah. Yeah, and I'm
nice.
really lucky because they're quite happy to allow me that sort of control. I know lots of places say no, it's all ours, and we'll let you know when we've done it. But I've just got to learn to let go. So the two I've submitted are different publishers, so it's all up in the air at the moment. We'll see how they work.
Ooh, I can't wait to talk about your books. So I'm going to bring up your website, and today I wanted to talk about three of your books, and this one's the first
Mm-hmm.
one, the Rython Kingdom. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Well, Rython Kingdom actually was the start of it was actually three word prompts on my writing group's website.
Mm.
And the three were blue beads, a castle, um, and a sorceress.
Hmm.
And for whatever reason, when I was writing one, when I saw the next prompt, I thought, oh, that like, dovetails in. And then the third one dovetailed in. And I thought, this could make a pretty cool story.
Mm.
So, as I'm English, I thought, I'm going to set it in medieval England, because I know all the castles and stuff. So, and then the story sort of morphed into this traveling troubadour. So he would travel around the kingdom and tell stories to lords and ladies, and entertain. Basically, that was the way he made his money. When he was sort of injured too much and couldn't go into battle anymore, so he would mainly talk about his feats in wartime, and all the battles he's won, and show off his scars, etc. But he's asked by the king to go and tell a story to the court, which is a huge honour. And when he's travelling, he has this dream, and it is the most perfect story for him to tell to the king and his court. What he doesn't understand is that there's a secret within the story, and when he relays it, something's going to happen.
Mm.
And he pairs up with a sorceress and her granddaughter to help. um, this wicked, vengeful witch who wants to take over the kingdom, um, how they're going to fight her and stop her doing what she wants to do. And it was just a fun story for me. I just enjoyed the fact that I could, bring up all the history I knew from England, sort of incorporate it in. And it's got some nice twists and turns and things you don't expect.
Ooh.
And I have a very strange, twisted mind. So some things in it you're thinking, really? She looks like a nice old lady. Well, I am, but when I'm writing, I'm this creator and I get into this stuff.
So,
So,
oh, you can go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
so this novella was, like, as far as I was concerned at the time, like a one-off. I was like, that's it, done, dusted, done that, on to the next thing. However, I got quite a few messages through various means, social media and website, etc., saying, "Where's the next one?" I'm thinking, "What next one? There isn't a next one." So I thought, well, reader pressure. Okay, I'll do another one. So then I had to come up with a follow up, which is
Oh,
called The Rython Legacy. And in the first book, the sorceress's powers are passed down, but they skip a generation. So in the next book, the story is about the granddaughter of the sorceress
this
that
one
was
right
in the
here.
Rython Kingdom. So if you keep going, the green one, yes.
This.
So this is the story of the granddaughter and how she is tasked with a slightly different um, quandary, shall we say, because um, she is being lured into the dark side of sorcery and witchcraft. And she has to find a way of either, delving into that and losing herself, or overcoming it and also
Mm.
saving the prince of the kingdom. So it's not the same sort of story entirely, although it's still set in medieval England.
Mhm.
But it's forces of good and evil, really. And that
Ooh.
that was a fun book because I could
Ooh.
delve into the dark side.
Did you do have to do like a lot of research for these books?
Well, when I lived in England, I used to tour England, Wales, and Scotland and do visits to ancient sites and medieval castles and historic houses, etc. So I'd got a basis of learning from actually being on these sort of sites, and also you know English history classes sort of teach you an awful lot. And that stuck with me because I really enjoy delving into the history and how people used to live. So I
Mm.
mean, I had to research medieval medicines and how they relate to each other, and there's the top tier is the king and his court, and then it steadily goes right all the way down to peasants. So yeah, it was fun to incorporate all that knowledge in the books.
Ooh. So, how did you do your character development in your books?
Um, well, it's it's like a natural progression, because when I'm writing, my characters like are whispering to me, and it's like having a movie in my head. I mean, I'll say, "Well, we'll do this," and they're going, "No, we're not. We're doing this." I'm going, "Okay, then. Who am I to argue?" So they'll come up with an idea. I think, well, that's much better than my idea. We'll go with that one. So it's some people say it's almost like, I don't know if it's like channeling writing. where it's
Huh.
like almost like a subconscious thing. Um, and that's where I find um, the most enjoyment, because I can get totally lost in the story and the people in the story and where they are, and I see it all.
Ooh, okay, okay. What was your hardest scene to write in your books?
Hmm.
That's tough.
In the first one, the Rython Kingdom, um, there's a scene where the witch um, makes the soldiers do some quite gory things, and
Ooh.
it's like, yeah,
You was
yeah,
like, I really don't want to write this, but I need to put it in here.
yeah, yeah, because she's malevolent. She's evil. She's enjoying making these things happen. And she has to be believable. You can't have someone, say, "Oh well, you're naughty and I don't like you," because that's not going to work. You need to have light and dark. You have to have also the shades in between, but you definitely have to have an antagonist that you're thinking, I really don't like you.
Yeah, like you gotta really make her evil. Like,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So, and I enjoyed sort of continuing the story with this one, because it was a nice progression. And once again, I thought, good, I've done what everyone wanted, I've done that, end of. Ha ha ha.
so I don't want you to give it away. I don't want you to give away the second book, but how is she lured into the dark side? Like, how is she lured?
Right. So the witch herself disguises herself
Oh,
as this little old lady who is very kind and cheers on the protagonist into, you know, you're being told you can't use your powers and you've got to suppress them, and but if you come with me, I'll show you ways that you can be much better than them, and so she just lures her into it.
ooh. I can't
Um,
wait to read these. These sound good. I'm excited. So I wanted I wanted to talk about the last book.
can you get
This
this
one,
one? Yep.
okay.
Right. So this one was a surprise, um, because I hadn't thought of doing another one yet again. But there was something about Malgraf, who is the witch, um, that sort of stuck with me, and I'm just thinking she is such a strong character. She has so much angst, um, and vengeful thoughts. She was someone that I thought I have to explore her more.
Ooh.
So that's why I did Malgraf's Dawning, because it's literally the story of her from a young child and how she evolves into this vengeful person, and where her powers come from, and how she relates to people around her, and she luckily finds mentors who have their own agenda
Ooh.
and are going to use her to carry through their plans.
Ooh.
But she has a very strong, defiant um, personality, and I just
Ooh.
wanted to write her because she's too good not to.
Yeah, tell her side of the story. So you don't make it to where I think it's Maleficent or I think it's Maleficent. Like you don't make us feel sorry for her, do you? Like
No,
you
no,
know.
no, she's wicked all the way through.
Ooh.
As
And
I
it
said
shows
before, I like the dark side.
and it shows like her development, like how she became who she is. and
Well,
why she's so
literally
evil.
from child upwards. Yeah, it's her journey to being what she is in the other books. So this is the prequel to the other two.
Ooh, okay, I like this. I like this. Someone wanted to say hey from Switch, so they said hey to us.
Hey,
And you wanted to read a little bit from Malgaff's Stocking. So,
I do. I will do my best. This is just the first chapter, so. The dark eyed child sat huddled in the corner, tossing runes on the earth floor. She mumbled and whispered overheard words. Her mother toiled at the fireplace, adding herbs and powders to a large cauldron. The aroma of herbs filled the mud and wattle hut, the fire smoke swirling up in a column to the hole in the roof. There was no chimney as such, so the hut, its inhabitants, and everything within the daub hut smelled constantly of smoke. A beetle scurried across in front of the child. She picked it up, examined it, then tore its legs off and threw it into the flames, where it sizzled and died. The child lowered her head to hide a smirk and went back to her game, disinterested once the beetle ceased to be. Cruelty brings its own punishment, Maggie. The child looked up at her mother, wide-eyed, as though she was innocent of the act. Mamma? All creatures have worth, child, remember that. Maggie shrugged her shoulders and observed the rune's message. There was change ahead. She could not read deeply into their meanings yet, so could not foretell if the change was good or bad. She looked up as her mother's shadow obscured the firelight. With a stern comment, the runes were swept from the floor and put into an apron pocket. Do not play with what you do not understand, child. Now go and fetch more firewood. You have played long enough. Upset at the confiscation of her game, Maggie bit her lip in annoyance, but did not dare not complain. She had received punishment for her insolence before. She picked up a wicker basket from beside the fireplace and wrapped herself in a shawl, then went into the cold winter air. Snow blanketed the ground, and icicles hung from the thatch. The forest was silent. In the depths of winter they rarely received visitors. It was a long trek from the villages, and only the most urgent of requests arrived. They received only a few panicked visitors who feared the journey too long, worried their relative already succumbed to evil omens, or perished during the wait for their arrival with a healing potion or banishment of bad spirits. The requests came in many forms and were normally left on the front step. A woven hamper with a scribbled directive inside, a pictorial note wrapped around a rock, or a piece of parchment within a bottle. Each one was accompanied with a payment of sort. Most were not coins, but lengths of cloth, candles, a wicker basket, seasonal fruit, berries, or vegetables. This bartering system was the price for the child's mother's unique skills. Many used Sienna's services with no one owned up to it. Some called her witch, others mystic or sorceress. The village folk would claim it was all nonsense, an idiotic belief in magic to friends and neighbours in an attempt not to lose face. However, if a spell or potion did not banish or cure, no one complained or harmed the sorceress, lest she befell a spell on them. Such was the suspicion and her protection from the king himself. Many years before, as a young woman, Sienna happened across the young king, unconscious from a fall from his horse. She tended his wounds, revived him, and when he felt able to ride, accompanied the youthful royal back to the castle. The castle courtiers were grateful to Sienna for saving the king's life, and he offered her a place to live within the castle walls as thanks. For several years she enjoyed the luxury of the king's court, with good food, comfortable quarters, and fine clothing. She became a healer to the royal family and many lords and ladies, plus their servants. Life was ideal, and Sienna felt safe and happy. Just to say, there might be a trigger here because there is a rape scene, just so everyone knows.
Oh, okay.
Okay, just so they know. That changed on a dark winter's night when she was raped by the king's most trusted advisor, or Winjamo, Sir Fallon. Sorry, Sir Fallon. It happened when Sienna walked back to her quarters after a feast in the Grand Hall. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see the Lord. He smiled and bowed. She curtsied. He asked if she required escorting to her rooms, but Sienna declined. However, Fallon took hold of her arm and dragged her to her quarters, shoveling her through the oak door. Too shocked to utter a noise or scream, Sienna fell to the flagstones. Fallon locked the door and seized her, throwing her to the bed. His hand pressed hard over her mouth as he violated her. His dark hair and beard filled her vision, his breath hot and heavy on her face and body. A hint of crude delight glinted in his penetrating, soot-coloured eyes. When it was done, he stood and rearranged his attire. "If you ever tell anyone, I will kill you," he declared, leaving Sienna weeping and shaking. She curled into the fetal position, feeling discarded like unwanted food. She feared to leave her room and stayed locked inside for 4 days, tormented with dreams of her attacker's face, the pain of the bruises and scrapes. She condemned him and herself in equal measure. Was it my fault? Did I encourage his advance? She pushed these dark thoughts back and forth, day after day, night after night, afraid to sleep. Any food made her stomach roll. On day 5, a young page knocked on her door, announcing the king required her presence. The court healer asked the boy to wait and escort her. In the throne room, the king was in conversation with none other than Sir Fallon. Sienna could not hold back her gasp and looked at her attacker with fearful eyes. Bowing deeply, he left the king and walked past Sienna. His eyes narrowed. His mumbled whisper she took as another threat. Unaware of the interaction, the king requested her to make a poultice for his mother's leg. Before he could engage her in more conversation, Sienna curtsied and hurried to her quarters to prepare the cloth catalysm. Sorry, I've got a tickle. The king frowned at her unusual demeanour. He enjoyed chats with his court healer on such occasions, but he quickly became embroiled in other matters. 2 days passed as Sienna tended the queen's mother's leg, even though she stayed within her own rooms at all other times, having meagre meals brought to her by the young page. As the weeks passed, Sienna spent more and more time hidden within her quarters, fear making her seldom venture into the courtier rooms, the king's throne room, or quarters in the gardens. When summoned, she requested a page to accompany her, hoping this would afford her some protection from Sir Fallon. As time passed, Sienna began to feel lethargic and vomited almost every morning. She imagined Sir Fallon had her food poisoned to guarantee her silence. Without sustenance, her hunger pains became all-consuming. A worrisome thought entered her mind. Had she become pregnant? Had the violation of her body doubled in number? It was a cut on the king's arm while practicing swordplay that brought Sienna to the king's room 8 weeks later. As she entered, he looked up in welcome and held out his bleeding forearm. "Sienna, I am in need of your excellent healing powers. A clumsy parry on my part while practicing swordplay has my forearm cut." She curtsied deeply, a smock billowing over her rounded belly in disguise as she approached the king. She examined the deep gash. The sight of blood never before affecting her made her almost retch. Taking a deep breath, she managed to answer, "Your Majesty, the flesh is sliced deeply. I will need to sew the skin together. Will you take a goblet of mead to allay the pain?" "I may drink, but I can tolerate the pain." "Sire, it will take some time to sew. I will gather my supplies and return shortly." As she turned to leave, Sir Fallon seemed to appear out of nowhere and stood in her path. Her eyes drew wide in fear, and her knees buckled. The king saw this and ordered a manservant rush to her aid. "Sienna," the king demanded, "what ails you?" Rising from the flagstones, assisted by the servant, Sienna looked from king to her attacker, unable to form words to answer her sovereign's query. Sir Fallon smirked at her before giving his own thoughts. "Your Majesty, from her high colour and fullness of belly, I would say she is with child. The wench has obviously been consorting within the castle walls, sire." Sienna watched the king's eyes widen and a deep frown crossed his forehead. "Is this true, Sienna? You make a mockery of my gratitude and hospitality by fraternising with men under my roof, an unmarried maid?" "No, sir, please, I did not fraternise, I swear." Unable to tell the truth, she kept her eyes fixed on the floor as she begged. "Sir Fallon speaks an untruth?" To answer truthfully, Sienna knew she would be punished for making such accusations against a member of the court. She was a lowly servant, although under that moment a favoured one. She had no power, no status. Falling to her knees, she looked up to the king, his face stern and steely-eyed. "Your Majesty, I fell prone to an attack on my womanhood, and shame has made me silent." He saw Sir Fallon grip his hands into fists. His stare caused her to shrivel under its intensity as he retorted, "You harlot!" He turned to his king. "These are excuses, sir. She is a woman of low character at the very least." "And you know this how, Fallon? In all the time Sienna has been within these castle walls, not once have I seen her in the company of a man. Do you explain your words?" Sir Fallon squared his shoulders. "She is without a husband, sire, yet with child. She could have entertained men in her quarters at any time without your knowledge." The king stood without engaging Fallon and approached her. "Name this man to prove yourself. I shall have him punished." Trembling, Sienna answered in the only way she could, "I cannot name him, sire. I did not see his face through a covering he held over his face. Forgive me for bringing shame to your court." "So, is what Sir Fallon says true? This attacker is a ploy to remain under my protection, enjoy my hospitality?" "No, sire, it is not within my power to name him." Sir Fallon saw his opening. "You see, sire, she speaks falsehoods. She is not to be trusted." The king's uttered words crushed Sienna's last hope. "I will not have the shame of an unwed mother within the castle walls, but due to your past services I shall be lenient. I afford you my protection outside these walls. Guards!" 4 men entered from their positions in the hallway. "Escort Sienna to her quarters, ensure she only packs her belongings, and walk her to the castle gates." Tears rolled down Sienna's cheeks, her defeat absolute, as she walked out of the throne room and into the corridor, with 2 guards on either side of her. In her quarters she gathered her meagre belongings, dried herbs, potion bottles, cloths and 2 smocks, leaving the given finery behind. She wrapped everything within a leather satchel before walking out into the courtyard. At the gates she glanced back to see Sir Fallon, arms folded, watching her carefully. Fearful, she walked the dusty path towards the forest, thoughts of her demise by her own hand foremost. It'd be swifter than awaiting Sir Fallon or one of his men, finding her alone and unprotected, the king's decree unheeded. Within the cool half-light of the forest she walked, alert to any sound of horses' hoofs or heavy footfalls. Every sound made her jump, her imagination envisaging many soldiers hunting her for sport, with Sir Fallon on horseback laughing. The fear and trek exhausted her, but she continued to walk until it was too dark to see. Finding a fallen tree with a hollow beneath it, she squeezed into the space and closed her eyes. The cold penetrated her flesh, nipped her fingers and toes. She hoped not to wake.
Ooh, I love this book. So is it on audiobook yet?
Not yet, no.
Oh man. So I would love to listen to this at work. Like maybe and you should read it. Don't have anybody else read it. You
Yeah,
should
lots
read
of people say that to me. I think it's the English accent. They say, "Oh, you should just keep reading."
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
definitely, definitely. So in this book, what was your hardest scene to write? I'm assuming the rape scene,
Um,
but
well, there were quite a few because obviously Malgraf is not a nice person, so she does some quite nasty things. Yeah, I mean, I sort of decided, right, I'm just going to let loose the dark and see what I can come up with. And of course, Malgraf is whispering in my ear saying we could do that.
ooh,
Yeah.
so
So yeah, it was for me it was entertaining because as a writer, you can do the fluff,
mhm,
but when you find someone who has such a deep, um, dark personality, it's fun to just delve into it.
ooh, ooh. So what was your funnest scene to write in this book?
Oh, oh, there was a lot. Um, I liked how she, waited on her revenge on certain people. Like, she didn't hit out immediately. She planned, what was the best way to wreak the most havoc.
Ooh, ooh, I love this. I love it. Maybe I have a dark side.
Yeah, we see, yeah, I think we all have one. We just don't always, go there, obviously, because, society doesn't want you to.
Which characters, okay, in all three of your books, which
Hmm,
characters did you relate the most to and why?
that's really difficult.
That,
Because they all have their own uh, inconsistencies. It's like I like, in the first book because it was what I thought would be the only one. I really loved the relationship between Gillam, the troubadour, the storyteller, and the sorceress granddaughter, because it was an unexpected relationship. It wasn't something that either of them were really looking for or expected. So I enjoyed that from the first book, and the second book was nice because I could play around with a new person
Mhm.
and sort of investigate how she was going to either fall into the trap or pry herself out. And then with Malgraf, I just liked that she was so dark.
I love it too now. So before I let you go, I have one final question. What
Mm.
advice would you give authors who are writing, starting out writing?
So I would say the first thing is not to give up, to practice as much as you can. When I started, I just used loads of word and picture prompts and just wrote, even if it was just a paragraph that was inspired by that. The more you practice, the more you understand your voice and how you write and what interests you. Um, and it may be that you find something that really grips you. I mean, it might be crime, it might be horror, it might be romance, it might be fantasy, whatever it is. If you're drawn to it and you find that you can create it in your own image and the way a story sort of is your story, then just make sure you go with your gut, really. um, and don't be deterred by people saying we should have written it a different way. Well, no, I'm not writing it a different way because that might be somebody else's. Always write to your truth, to your storytelling.
Yes, this is
This
really
it,
great.
that is the fundamental way that we as writers, where every single one of us is unique. We know thousands of people write romances, but they're all different.
Mhm.
So
Yes,
you don't think, well, they've already done that. Well, yeah, but you haven't done it.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So
That's really, really great advice. I want to thank you so much, Mandy, for coming on my podcast today and chatting with me.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
You have a great day.
Yeah, thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, thank you all so much for listening to She Blurs podcast. If you would like to purchase any of Mandy's books, they are on Amazon and they are also on her website, which is mandyevebarnett.com. And you can scroll up here and it has all her books that she's written and been in anthologies and children's books and everything. And you can go and purchase some of her books or all of her books and read them. And yeah, thank you all so much for listening to Shootbirds podcast and see you next time for the next interview. Bye.